Welcome to the Helpful for Life morning show, the only show where we're still figuring it out as we're making it.
It's probably not the only show where that's happening, but we're very obvious about it, aren't we?
Yes, that's a good point. But as you can see, we now have improvements. We have a little bit of a fancier looking screen. Woo! I even have some names that pop up for us. But, I don't know if I've figured out the button combination yet to do that from all the way over here.
We'll just let you get up and jump across, hit the button every now and then,
perfect.
get an action scene in.
Oh, action scene. I like it. We got the various levels of, engagement here. That's what we're going for.
Yeah, we really are. And, as we're engaging this morning, so it's still kind of bright and early for me. I'm just getting accustomed to this new little routine that we're starting.
Yes, speaking of things we're trying to get accustomed to and think about. One of them is the name for this podcast. So, by the way, if any of you who I've not announced this show to are watching, because that's a thing we were talking about the other day, which we can, of course, talk about at length. The difference between creating and then marketing. So, that's the nice thing. We're getting the tires kicked out before we do the big marketing push. But anyways, when we were talking about names, one of the names I had come up with was BED, which stood for Better Every Day. The only podcast we made this podcast to force ourselves to get out of bed. It'd hopefully help you out too.
Right. No, that works on multiple levels, but it could work where we just go to sleep. Right?
Yes. Just like our audience.
Yes. Just
yeah. Who needs headspace when you
when you've got us? Yeah.
No, that's funny. And you were just telling me a second ago about how you had a very strenuous workout yesterday. Why don't you tell all your audience members about that?
Yeah, I went to go work out yesterday, and the workout ended up being all stretching for 45 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, so not the usual. I generally try to get the heart rate up instead of down. But yeah, midway through, then I think I was in more pain than I'm normally in trying to do something strenuous.
Well, stretching is one of those things where some people probably haven't even done 45 minutes of stretching in their life. So, it's probably for the best. Yeah, combined.
Yeah.
Aggregate. Yeah.
Yeah, their whole life. It was pretty fascinating because you also have to think back to the times when you were a child and you could just be like bent in two and it didn't bother you. And then now, you can barely bend over and touch your toes. So,
yes. That is a fun thing about aging, and also we like to completely blame it on aging and not the fact that we just stopped being active.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with us.
No, absolutely not.
Or our behavior, or our patterns and habits, and all that good stuff.
Oh wow, just look at Ryder tying it right back into everything that we're talking about. Genius. So as far as the show outline goes and the various things we're going to talk about today, yesterday we made the tentative promise of having that all outlined for you. But what good are promises if they're not to be broken? So again, we like to live our vision here at the morning show, insert placeholder name here, because, we like to improve just a little bit every day. And we want to recognize, like, we all have this ideal in our heads up here in the stars, Can you see it?
Is that it?
Yeah. That may just be a shadow.
Never mind.
But yeah, you see the dreams up there, and we always are going to fall short of those, at least initially, right? It takes some time and effort to get to the point to where you're actually anything that resembles what your dream looks like, right?
Right. No. This is the unfortunate part of all these dreams, right? Is they can seem quite unrealistic in the beginning. Even little things like touching your toes.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And so one of the key philosophies helpful for life that we like to teach here is encouraging people to focus instead of the big goal long term, and focusing on that gap and how you're continually failing over and over by hitting that goal. By the way, we have a series, just on this. You're going to notice a trend here. The name is still being worked on, but something along the lines of a list that I'll be launching sometime within the next week or so. It really talks about the downsides of that approach and the benefits of the approach of doing a little bit every day and focusing more on that small improvement instead of focusing on that big gap.
Yeah, and this is a lot of this now, they have a lot of cognitive behavioral science around these kind of things. And we can actually dig into a lot of that now and see how people actually work. Where I think previously people would just say, well, you need more discipline and willpower. And we're basically finding out that those exist in tiny quantities, and it's dependent on so many factors that it's really hard to rely on something as old school as just like straight up willpower.
Yes, and old school is the right term, because like you're saying, it's really not as much of a thing as people think it might be. Which reminded me, I just read a book called The 1% Rule, and it's on this very concept, improving 1% every day. And it was kind of a culmination of a variety of things that I've been reading and hearing over the past few years. So it was kind of cool to see it kind of wrapped up and referencing a bunch of stuff that I read. Either we're both onto something, or we're both equally diluted by the same sources.
Right. I like being diluted by these things because, of course, I came across this in James Clear's Atomic Habits, right? He talks about the 1% rule. In there, just get 1% better, and by the end of the year you'll be like 37 times better.
Yeah,
I don't know what the math is, but there is some sort of math around it. And it's I think he actually called it this really dense title, like the aggregation of marginal gains. But what's kind of fun about it is that you can actually see results, but those results don't show up for, say, 5 years.
Right.
Because you're just very, very slowly getting a little better and a little better. But if you think about the you today and the you in 5 years,
completely different.
Right. I mean,
hopefully improved.
Right. I mean, I know I'm completely different. Yeah,
that's for sure. But I think that's enough of us talking before we have our fancy introduction. So,
hey,
let me go meander over there and go press the button as I tell everyone that I am Reed Garcia, the founder of Helpful for Life.
Beep, 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 beep.
Beep, beep, beep. Oh, no. Oh, there it is.
Oh, wow. Right on his face.
That's so big. Yep. There we go. So that's how that goes. That's a little less on my face.
Hey.
And there's Ryder Richards.
I'll just put my hand up there.
You spend the time figuring the things out, and then you make a last-second change, which kind of nullifies all of the things you did. But you take what you get, right?
Yeah, well, this is the other thing is, you have pulled off quite a few things just in the last 24 hours on the show. So, we're getting better every day.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is way more than a 1% increase. So
hey, I appreciate
congrats.
it. We definitely will not be able to continue with this rate of improvement.
It's going to drop off.
Which is another trap a lot of people fall into, right?
Yes. Not we all kind of plateau at certain points. But
yes.
Yeah, intros. I know we introduced ourselves a little bit last time. Reed, has anything changed between yesterday and today for you?
I managed to do that, which is cool.
You hit a button. Nice.
Nothing like the accidental button press. Well, clearly I've become slightly more clumsy, and I think I probably need to do a little bit more stretching. So,
well, I know some people that can help with that.
Yeah. Not too much has changed with me today, though every day in entrepreneurship does make me more willing to be okay with less than perfect. And so that's one of the first topics that I'd like to talk about today is knowing when enough is enough. And I wanted to start off with a story, and that is about my RV. So for those of you at home who aren't aware, when me and Danielle, my wife, were going through life, we were like, okay, what are ways we could make our life as hard as possible? And the first thing we said is, all right, Reed, you know what? You try and do that entrepreneur thing. Let's see what it's like, you not making any money for a while, and we'll just see where that goes. Yeah? And then we were doing that for a while, and then after we're like, you know what? This would be more difficult if we moved from a house into, a 30 by 10 metal box that has an earthquake every day, right, and is also a 20-year-old vehicle.
Oh, that sounds great. Did you at some point also just like strap bricks to your feet and everything to really make it impossible?
That would have been a good idea. That would have been a good idea.
Well, that's what I'm here for. Good idea, guy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good idea, guy. I think we need a little animation, dude, jumping across the screen. But yeah, so after I had quit my corporate job, about, I don't know, 9 months later or so, after the idea had gestated, we decided to go into an RV. And people always ask us, like, oh yeah, like, tell us how you made that decision, or what brought that about. And I was like, one day I was like, hey, Danielle, what do you think about traveling on an RV? And I just kind of threw it out there, and not expecting her to say yes, and not really having any expectations at all. I honestly don't even remember where I got the idea, but I just kind of threw it out there, and she was like, yes. And I was like, oh, okay,
Cool.
yeah, I guess we should figure this out. And that then became another great distraction. Why focus on starting a business when you could try and learn anything about RVing, seeing as I'd never even been in one in my entire life.
Yeah, no, but there's something very interesting about there's the distraction, but there's also sort of jumping circumstances and constraining things. And they tend to say that a lot of creativity comes out of constraint, right? A lot of good things come out of it. So y'all went for like an extreme version of it. I mean, it's like tiny home on wheels.
Yeah, well, we did, and that's in a way, some ways how our marriage has been from the beginning. We graduated, and then 2 weeks later we got married, and then 2 months later we moved across the country from Texas to Los Angeles, of all places. So hitting both ends of that spectrum, right? But yeah, that was a great, in some ways we have lived our lives in a handful of extremes. Admittedly, still upper middle class white guy, just checking in here. Not some extremes, right? But yeah, having that dynamicism, if that's even a word, of moving, if not every day, close to every couple of days, and going and seeing all the various states. And actually, Ryder, why don't you hold up that mug there?
Yes.
What a nice little prop we've got here. It's not the easiest. Oh wait. Oh, let's do the close up. Oh, look at that, and the giant lovely face. Man, that looks like a thumbnail right there, waiting to happen.
Oh man, yeah.
Look, it came back the read and writer.
Oh yes.
Oh look, I'm even bigger and more superior than you somehow.
As usual, lowly co-host over here.
You're just the lowly co-host. I had to compensate for the fact that you're about a foot taller than me.
Thanks, Mom and Dad.
Yeah,
finally
exactly.
got something over on Reed.
Succeeding at something.
Yeah, succeeding at one thing.
But yeah, so we jumped in this RV thing, and yes, it was, by some people, that was another thing, right? Just like with entrepreneurship, it's interesting to see how people reacted, and some people were like, what are you doing? You're crazy. First you quit a job, now this, right? And then some other people, a lot of them, and I would say most actually, were like, oh wow, like that's awesome. That's so cool that you did that, especially at your age. And then the one that you hear a lot too is, I wish I could do that. Which, my response a lot of times is, well, you can. And that's, a theme that we'll hit on, time and time again over the show is that a lot of these blocks that we have in our head are just that. They're blocks that we've either put there ourselves, or a lot of times, society and people around us have put into our head. And so it was a great awakening to like, hey, you want to do something crazy? Just throw out the idea and then just start doing the steps to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and you had a partner who was down for the journey too, right? And
that helps a lot.
I think so. I really do think that working in tandem with other people or having a collaboration where everyone's equally as crazy,
yeah,
it helps.
And I want to say that Lincoln was a great partner for that, and it was cool for Danielle to come along as well. But really, he and I had a lot of those, father-son moments.
Yeah.
We were cooking food together, and he would eat a little bit, I'd eat a little bit. It was great.
Sounds ideal.
Yes, very very ideal.
And then occasionally, Danielle could come out and play a little bit.
Yes,
and,
when she was allowed.
Right. As long as she stayed quiet.
Yes, and and for those of you at home counting, yes, this is day 2 of Danielle being the punching bag. When in doubt, make it happen. But the reason I brought up the RV originally was because we're talking about settling for less than perfect, and then knowing and that's actually in that exact phrasing kind of describes the process of, at least in my mind, and I'm sure in a lot of people, is that you are settling, but the reality is perfect isn't attainable, right? And there's the law of diminishing returns, where for example, when it goes to school, right? In order for you to get that 85, 90 or whatever, obviously depending on who you are, right? But it takes a certain amount of work. But then that extra work to get from that 90 to that 98 or to that 100, that is so much more work. And so the argument is it's not worth all of the work you're doing there. Instead, focus all that extra work on something else.
Yeah, no, this makes a whole lot of sense. And in terms of school, it's quite easy to see it because we sort of measure it out. And at the end of the day, we all end up getting the same degrees. There's a guy that came through grad school right after me at the school that I went to, and he ended up making one art piece in 2 years, and he still has the same degree I've got, right? We both have a master's degree in art. And yet, I sunk a ton of effort in. He sunk very little. So at some point, it comes back to like what you're actually getting out of it, right? And a lot of that for me was, of course, I'm not going to make one perfect art piece. I'm going to learn along the way by making lots and lots of art pieces. And there's some guys, a famous photographer named Jerry Yulesman, that actually set up 2 of his classes and said, I want you as photographers to go out and take one perfect picture. And that was the assignment for one class. The next class was, I want you to shoot something like 5,000 pictures. And then at the end of the semester, he actually looked through all the photographs, and the people that shot a ton of photographs ended up having better composition, better skill, and overall better photos than the people who were just looking for one. So there's these weird little anecdotes like that about going for perfection really doesn't lend towards perfection.
Right.
So something is in the process of us just doing it and just jumping down those holes that I think is really phenomenal. And then the idea is like, how do we start that? How do we get there? Not looking for a 98 on your paper, but maybe writing 3 drafts of it and all of them being in the 80s.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad that you brought up the photography as an example, because that's something that I myself actually got into, and I started doing that right before my brother and I took a trip to South America. And I was like, we're going to South America for 3 weeks. How could I not get a camera? And I was like, I need to record this. And from that, I actually ended up taking a whole bunch of awesome pictures. And it was literally my first time. We went to Best Buy like the night before flying out. I went and bought a DSLR. First one, I don't even know if I'd used one before. And, took the little quick crash course online, figuring out a couple things. And then I just went out and shot. And sure, I was helped by having beautiful, amazing things to take pictures of. But I also ended up with these pictures that, a lot of people told me like, hey, that could be in a gallery, or you should sell that, or things like that, which, by the way, we will be selling some of those. And get, you can see right now, this right here is the RV in picture, and that's actually printed out. And eventually we're going to have some ways for you guys to buy some of the art that we've created, both Ryder and myself, and also eventually, hopefully, some of you guys as well. Just another way to help engage with the audience and share some of the things that we've done, and help using those things to bring joys to each other. And so back with the RV and the imperfection, so this we get this RV, right? And you first start shopping and you're like, oh, well, with RVs, if you've ever watched one of those shows on like HGTV, in the doctor's office, or at your parents' house, or if you just a guilty pleasure or not guilty pleasure, especially you as a DIY guy, I'm sure you've seen plenty of HGTV in your day.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And it's really annoying too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to go up. Sorry to cut you off. I'm going to go off on a tangent with just the DIY shows. Just they're infuriating because they make everything look so easy.
You mean it doesn't all happen in 2 days?
Can you believe that?
Yeah.
So weird.
The most realistic part about HGTV and these repair shows is when they go and they say, all right, we're ready, team. Let's go. We've got a $20,000 budget. Let's get started today. They get the sledgehammer. They knock down one ball. Ooh. There's the mold and the bad electrical and the plumbing from 1920. There goes your $20,000 budget.
Yeah, I know. Just to repair this one hole.
Yeah, exactly. And if we hadn't opened up this can of worms, we wouldn't have seen all the problems back there.
Fine.
But now that we've opened it.
Yeah. You wanted an open floor plan.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what you get.
So yes, that is very true with HGTV, which, that ideal aspect, but also the problems that come up, right? And so with the RV, you're shopping, and the RV, the shows I was talking about were the ones where they show people getting their RVs, and they're like $100,000, couple $100,000. These things are freaking nice. I mean, some people, like, when you say RV, you're like, ooh, gross. I'm like, bruh, have you been in some RVs? They're like freaking private jets. So, like, that's the first thing to know about RVing. There's a spectrum. If you want to be hanging out with Jimmy, who's got no teeth but has really sharp needles, like, you can do that. And on the leaky trailer, metal falling apart, all that kind of stuff. But if you want to be doing some lines with Jerry Jones, like in in the back of, the Dallas Cowboys stadium, he's probably got some sick RVs to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, just for that one purpose.
Yeah, knowing him, probably
Right.
so. And then he sells pictures of him doing that just to make a little bit extra money on it.
Yeah, because he needs a scratch.
He's a businessman at heart. But yeah, so when we were looking for RVs, we were like, okay, let's find something that is good but not too expensive. And also there's a little bit of this aspect of having something that we wouldn't like freak out if something happened, right? You have one of these really nice things, $100,000 multiple $100,000, like you happen to, I don't know, turn that giant thing and kind of bump up against a concrete barrier in a gas station like Danielle did. Oh crap, she's getting under fire again. Oh man, it's really good thing she's not in here to give me any visual cues that I shouldn't be doing this. But then you don't freak out,
Should we have like an eye roll emoji?
Yeah,
or
I like it.
animation that's just like Danielle, just
what is this right now in the chat? Oh, here we go. Happy to have a roll. See, there we go. We've got Danielle. She's participating, and thank you so much for the shout out. And now I'm realizing this needs to be clicked again to go away. Like I said, learning episode 1 here. Why have episode 0? Maybe we should have started negative.
No. Well, I also like this, though. I think we should incorporate this into all the shows, is Reed having to get some exercise.
Yes, the
every
stretching
morning,
exercise,
the morning exercise.
Just a little bit
Jump
every
up,
day,
run
right?
around.
And so as we're doing the RV and we found it, we're like, okay, let's get something that is good enough. And that ended up becoming kind of the theme as we were going on. We're like, okay, so we found the RV. For those of you curious at home, it was a 1999 Winnebago Brave, 30-foot long, which is a Class A RV. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Class A, that's kind of what they look like. They kind of look like a bus. A lot of people think those are the traditional type of RV. So that's the one we got. And we bought it from this couple who had bought it not too long ago and a couple years before that or something like that. And then they had done a little bit of work to it. They made it a little bit nicer. That's the good thing about it being 20 years old. It had a little bit of a facelift. I don't know if you needed a facelift when you were 20, but not everything ages as well as you.
Well, no, yeah. Once again, thank you, Mom and Dad.
Yes.
It's all in the genetics. Yeah. I was just built different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I do like the funny thing about this is when you're talking about RVs, my neighbor is actually living in his RV right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and it's got 2 fireplaces in it.
Oh.
And of course, a big screen television.
Classic.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's really is better than the house that he rented that's next to us.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Well, one important thing to note about Ryder is he lives in that interesting spot where it's just enough of civilization to where they have plumbing and things like that, but not enough of civilization to where, the community provides it.
No, right. Yeah. So we have to have things like septic systems, right? Because our community will provide us with water. We're just not going to do anything about your waste.
Yes, but he's got the greenest grass in the neighborhood because of that. And once again, for those of you who aren't aware of why he has the greenest grass, it's because he is a very flatulent man. And he actually is so flatulent, he incorporated it into one of his recent artworks, a series called Fart Art. And so that, I'm sure that did well for the septic.
It just does well for everybody. I really like to reveal these underlying truths people don't like to really tap into. And, a lot of people try to hide these things. And, but it's what did you say? Better out than in?
Better out than in, yes. I think we're doing pretty well. We've got a couple callbacks already on episode 1. I think this is good. So, people get that you are just going for good enough, right? And let's just assume that because of this beautiful explanation we've given of why that should be, right? You aim for good enough, right? But what does that look like for you in your life? Whether art related, productivity related, whatever. Like, what does that look like for your life? And is there a certain area where you think you've done it really well or really poorly?
Oh man, what a question. Yeah, there's multiple areas. With the art thing, it's kind of easy to talk about because I've spent so much time being thoughtful about that space. So there's something to, and if we wanted to get into it, just like making a single drawing, how many hours are you going to spend? Like, what is the impact going to be? Well, getting that extra 10 hours in on that drawing actually make it that much better. So at some point, you sort of are saying like, well, what is my intent with this? Where am I going with this? What do I want to happen from this? If you have to go for photorealism, then sure, spending an extra 100 hours on that piece might be what you have to do to get to the point that you need it to be. On the other hand, if the entire idea is to convey a notion or a concept or a joke, then do you need to spend that amount of time on it? Will it accomplish it with less work?
So what you're saying is, the jokes that I put elaborate setup in, it just didn't actually land. That probably wasn't worth it.
Yeah, you probably should have A/B tested that first.
Okay, all right, now I know. Before make joke, A/B test it.
A/B test,
and the best place to make joke is not live on the internet where it'll live forever.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought. Hang on. I thought that's why we were doing this
Oh,
show.
right. Okay, this is the A test.
Yes.
And then if this completely fails and blows up in our faces, we'll always have B.
Yes, of course. Why not? Yeah.
We'll be on all those memes too.
Yeah, and no one will know it was us making those horrible jokes.
Perfect.
Part A. No, I think that there's some things there that are sort of fascinating too, because of course I had an entire career in the arts, and then was an art professor, ran art galleries, did a whole lot of things in that space, and then about 5 years ago moved out of that space. Not completely. I've still got a foot in it because I still make art and do shows on occasion, but taking what I would consider a level of high expertise in one field, and then just saying, you know what, I'm going to do something else now. That there's something fascinating about sort of breaking the current model that you're in and trying out something else. But I think there's also something sort of that generates a level of relief in doing that. And I'd be kind of curious to know if that's how you felt moving into the RV. Like, not only is it a new set of challenges that makes life more exciting and reinvigorates things, but, also, did you actually get relief from the previous thing you were in? Did you move from like one trap into another? And since it was a trap of your own choosing, was it more beneficial?
That's a great question. And it is definitely a little bit of both, right? Before I answer that question, I'm curious to know where you fall on this spectrum. I fall on the spectrum that I don't know, or I won't say necessarily that everything happens for a reason. That like presupposes that something caused it, right? But which, to be honest, I haven't made up my mind completely on. But I've definitely think you can learn from everything you did, and I definitely try and live that no regrets type of lifestyle, and more so like, hey, yeah, you did all this stuff, but what did you learn from it? How can you move forward, right? And which is another type of one of the names we came up with, which is failing forward, because as long as you're failing forward, that's okay, right? And that's one of the key shifts with entrepreneurship, especially when it comes to serial entrepreneurs, is like failure is almost the expectation, just even percentage wise, right? And the sooner people kind of get okay with that, both at the small scale and the larger scale, the more successful, ironically, they can become, is because they're willing to fail. They're willing to have that drawing that isn't just perfect, and because they are learning and growing and things like that. So, I guess what are your thoughts on that before I tell a little more about my RV?
Yeah, no, I think it goes back to that idea of if you're willing to fail, then it goes back to that idea of the photographing class again, right? If you're going to take one perfect photograph versus take 1,000 and then just see which ones come out that are good, right? Then it is also a version of A/B testing, but along the way, you're building up all these experiences. So I would say the other side of failure is when you're making those, like, as long as you have a feedback process where you're like, okay, what did I learn from this? And then moving on, I think that you're going to just accumulate so much experience that it becomes almost embodied experience at that point.
Yeah, and we've been talking a lot about failure and expectations and things like that, but we haven't even talked about what the source of those expectations are and whether or not they're good, right? And of course, there's the plight of comparison to other people, and we'll talk about that in a second. But when it came to the RV, one of the things that I think most, if not all people underestimate is the value of a change of environment, especially in this day and age where just look at the average American, like on an average day or on an average week, like they're in the same environment, right? They wake up in the same bed. And of course, there's plenty of people who don't fit this mold, right? But they're waking up in the same bed. They're going to the same job. They're probably even taking the same route to work. And then who knows, they probably fall into the same kind of patterns with the lunch they eat, where they eat it, and then same kind of thing on the way back home and stuff like that. And that's just on the daily picture, much less on a weekly or monthly, and this kind of, I don't want to say it's a mantra that I live by, but it is something that's popped into my head over the last few years. Is one of my goals kind of is when somebody asks me that I haven't seen in a while, whether that be a month or a couple months or a year, I don't want my answer to be same old. And that's, I'm not judging or saying that's not okay for other people to have that. But for me personally, I think it makes my life a little more rich to have a little more variety in there. And that's a little bit of who I am, And when it comes to board games, I would much rather play 100 different games than play one game 100 times or 10 games 10 times, right? I like that variety. I like that novelty. And also, especially being in a creative field, I think it's very valuable too.
Yeah, and if I was going to push back the opposite direction on this, there is something about having a routine that offloads cognitive stress. And so I think for a lot of us, it's finding that sort of balance. So taking the same route to work or wearing the same color of suit every day, like they say, like Obama did or something else, right? The idea is that it just takes cognitive stress off because you're no longer having to make these small decisions. So it frees you up to make larger decisions. So there is something about your daily routine maybe being stabilized, but then the purpose of stabilizing that is so that you can have a more interesting, more robust life in some other way. Right. At least that's what I'm hoping for.
For sure. And one of the things is one of the things that made me think about was how I lost my train of thought. That's how it goes sometimes, right?
Right.
But yeah, what better distraction from a train of thought than another comment from our viewers? Let's see what this one says.
Oh man, thank you, saving the day.
Yes, the dark side of the morning routine or the daily routine. Yes, there are dark sides and light sides. So thank you, Danielle. Not only did you successfully distract, but you also brought us back. Here we go.
This is an action show.
Hey, action show indeed.
The morning action show.
Yes, and that balance and the drudgery actually of making those decisions, that was the trap that we fell into. So, rule number 2 for RVers out there, if you want to learn how to RV, stick with us for 564 episodes and you will get one tip at a time, and by the end you will be ready to go. Tip number 2 is people always tell you don't go too fast. That's the number one mistake people make. They want to see everything, they want to do everything, which is a good corollary to life as well. It's like, no, just try and do a little bit, try and space it out, try and be better for the long term. My mom always tells me with relation to drinking, she says it's a marathon, not a sprint. And some days I agree with her, some days not so much. Just depends.
Sometimes you got to get break a sweat really quickly.
Exactly. Get that cardiovascular system going. Yes, yeah, just like you were saying.
Shock to the system.
I didn't come here to drink to stretch for 45 minutes.
No,
I'm working out. I know. But yeah, so for me and for us, honestly, I was like, I don't know if we're ever going to do this again. Like, when are we going to literally have all of our stuff in our car? We could go wherever we wanted. And tomorrow, we were talking about if you want to change or you want to do something different, literally just do it. Like, it doesn't get much more literal than that when you're in an RV. And we, there's a thought exercise that if you win the lottery, right? If you had all the money in the world, because that's all you need to do everything you want, right? Money.
Yeah, we could get into that at some point too.
For sure.
Yeah.
But if you had all the money in the world, or really put a better way, if you could do whatever you wanted in life, what would you do? And we really took that to heart. And we were fortunate enough to, grow up when we did, have the supporting families we did, have the education we did, have the jobs we did, have the savings we did, in order to be able to make that jump. And we do not take that for granted. We do not take that lightly. We do think it's a privilege that we were able to do this type of thing. And so, but in doing that, I was like, I don't know that one, we'll ever do this again, just because of situations and, when you start to get kids, and two, like Danielle said yes right away, but is she going to change her mind later on? So that's always kind of in the back of my head, like, oh, we gotta get this in while I can. And then also some of it's like, all right, when am I ever going to be, in Montana? It's not like I'm just passing through Montana, right? Those areas are called the flyover states because although they're beautiful, there's not the major metropolitan areas there, so people fly over them. So it's just not as natural to go to them, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, so we went the fast pace, and we were changing, on average every couple days, going to a new place, and that change did get to us, and having to make all those decisions, It's very different when you wake up and you're trying to do something, and whether it be for work or something creative or whatever, and you just wake up and you roll over and you put on your clothes or whatever and you start doing it, versus, okay, about to be in Pennsylvania in 4 hours. What's in Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
And then after that, you're like, okay, Pittsburgh. What's to do in Pittsburgh? And you're like, we'll be there in 30 minutes. And then after all that, it's like, okay, now let's try and make some other decisions. Even like, what am I going to eat for lunch or whatever? It's like by the end of the day, you're mentally exhausted.
Yeah, there's something really kind of fascinating about setting yourself up for a life that's going to require constant decision making, right? And I've talked to people before that say that that's what, CEO or exec level jobs is making 1,000 decisions a day, and each one of them have tremendous impact. And that reminded me of when I taught elementary school for 1 year, and just to give it a shot. And at some point I heard that, even school teachers are making something like 3 decisions per second. Man. On like what to do or not to do every second. And so by the end of the day, you're exhausted. I don't know if that stat's true. It was probably told to me by another teacher, so it's probably not true. But
they're not so good with numbers.
Yeah. Neither are your kids. But yeah, no, there's something really interesting about having to make decisions all day, every day, and having to be aware as well. Like not really having the time to zone out, to mentally sort of enter a dream space or whatever you want to do, to sort of daydream and process on the fly. Because when you are making decisions constantly, I don't know, I think that it uses a different part of your brain. It doesn't really allow you to sort of cognitively process and keep up and then hit that refresh every now and then, because you're just running on it, and then you're left with only your sleep state to do your processing.
Yeah, for sure. And that space and time without inputs, by the way, which is an important thing, I think, and that's where I think a lot of people get it wrong, myself included, is in that downtime, instead of then incorporating another podcast, another Audible book, another Netflix show, another whatever, like just give yourself the time and the space to think and process and do something with all of those infinite number of inputs that you're getting every day. Because guess what? The average person in this day and age is getting so many inputs, right?
Yeah, we're getting bombarded constantly. And of course, they are saying that our attention span is shrinking and it's shorter than that of a goldfish.
So follow us on TikTok.
Yeah. Immediately. Right now. I know you're on your phone anyway.
Yeah,
just go ahead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, giving that space to be able to process, that was another good takeaway that I got from the RV. But also, it's really been driven home for me in the last few months, because this is kind of in a nutshell how it went for us. Like, we did the RV thing, we traveled. Eventually, I was like, okay, it doesn't make sense for me to focus on work right now. Let's focus on this once in a lifetime. At least that's what we were telling ourselves, or in the back of my head. Like, let's focus on this more like a sabbatical, right? And let's just really enjoy the things here. And like, I wouldn't want to go to Quebec and then not have done the Quebec thing because I needed to work for a couple hours that day. And again, like, privilege to be in that spot. Let's fully take advantage of it. So we leaned into it, did that, traveled around, and having that space also helped me form more ideas, helped me be more observant, helped me, instead of just constantly like stressing about what are we going to do next, what about my business, what about this, what about that, I was able to live more in the moment, right? And yeah, that was also one of the great things about the RV, since we talked about inputs, was changing it from those digital inputs into the analog real life ones, right? And being able to, for example, go into go onto a field in Boston and be like, hey, this is where the shot heard around the world was. Like, that was cool. I'd never done that before. Like, much richer than just reading it in a history book, right?
Yeah, no, it really is. And I'm reading something right now that's talking a lot about how we have to physically embody forms of knowledge and mastery and stuff like that. And it is like, we are spatial creatures. And it's really fascinating, if we can jump into this at some point, but like also how VR works to sort of incorporate that spatiality, but in a virtual way. And the idea of like how our brains work and how our bodies work in sync with each other. And there's some interesting things there, but actually being present in a moment, changing your circumstances, changing your location, all of those things I think can have a profound impact on how you see and perceive the world. And there's just little phrases all that, that you'll catch, like, what is it? It's like, to solve ignorance, read, what's the other one? Something about, to solve ignorance, read a book, to solve xenophobia, travel.
Yeah.
It's just stuff like that, or to solve racism, travel. And it's just because when you start moving around and seeing different things, then it opens your mind in a different way, and you perceive it, and you can sort of internalize those lessons. So, there's something about the RV thing, but also your decision to sort of take it and say, you know what, we're going to lean in 100% here instead of trying to multitask.
Right. Yeah, and multitasking. What a myth if our generation's ever had one, right? And I'm sure we'll talk about that in more detail at another point. But for those of you who aren't aware, multitasking is a myth. There's been many studies on it that show, like, you're not going to be doing, more than one task well. Now, obviously, there's some things where it's like very rote, routine, monotonous, whatever. That's the type of thing where, sure, I could be washing the dishes while listening to a podcast and thinking something like that, right? But if I'm trying to do some creative work while I'm also like watching a movie in the background, like, you're just operating at a little less, cognitive load.
Yeah, and yeah, so there's quite a bit of research on that, and interestingly enough, that we operate kind of like a computer in that way, but we're actually worse at it. And then there's the other thing about just at some point just being okay with doing the dishes. Actually not needing to be distracted, not needing that additional input, and just actually focusing on the thing itself and finding it to be sort of amazing or beautiful. And this takes us maybe to more Eastern ideas, or something about like when in Japan, each action, when you can kind of ritualize each action into something sacred, where it becomes something that you do beautifully for its own sake.
Right.
And this is how you live a beautiful life.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's a good, very poignant way to say it, right? It's like, if you make sure that everything that you do, you're doing with intention, and you are thinking and believing and focusing on the beautiful aspect, then, by definition, like, your life will be beautiful, right? So that is very clear and simple,
and it doesn't
not necessarily easy, right?
No, but it also doesn't take a lot of money.
Right.
And this is another fascinating idea. So many of the things that we think it means to live a meaningful or beautiful life require a lot of revenue. And the idea that you could wash your dishes beautifully, like, it doesn't require any extra money. And this is a hard thing for us to sort of wrap our heads around, I think.
Oh, for sure. And, in case you guys haven't heard it yet, buzzword of the podcast definitely is going to be money. I mean, we're going to talk about that a lot. And that's not because we're necessarily obsessed with it, but just because there's so many misconceptions and psychological traps. And if you want to talk about cultural differences and societal norms and things like that, that money is one of the things that changes a lot based on where you live. And, we're talking a little bit about changing your environment, things like that. And that brings me to one of the segments we want to introduce here, which is a challenge every day for you guys. And we're going to come with a better way of saying it, probably something that sounds a little better and, I don't know, less work, to trick you into it, like your vitamins or something like
yes.
that. But yeah, so for today, that daily challenge for you is, what is one way that you can change your environment? And I've tried to help. I have helped other various people in my life over the last few years, especially, but in my entire life, and also with myself. The first thing that often comes out is that resistance. Is like, oh, I don't want to do that, or I'm not going to do that, or I'm not the type of person who does that. What are your thoughts on those phrases?
Oh man, it's really fascinating because I find that you can change your mind quite easily and instantly become that person as well, right? I'm not the kind of person who does karaoke, and then all it takes is one good karaoke experience, and all of a sudden you're a karaoke fiend, right? But some of it is just overcoming that original trepidation, but we also build these models of ourselves. And what's even more fascinating that we could get into is how society builds these models for us.
Yes.
And they make sure that we keep operating in the same groove or the same rut. And eventually they hand us the uniform that we wear for the rest of our lives. And we don't have to do that, but to not do that, you really have to be aware of what you're doing. You have to stay aware of the world.
Yeah, and I really like the word rut there more so than groove. And I guess I would use both of those depending on if you think it's a positive or a negative thing. And and I would say for most of us out there, like a lot of times it's more like a rut. And that's in the sense of, what society and people around you are keeping you into a certain role, right? Because of, again, these expectations and this comparison, which is where these roles even come from, right? But the easy thing to forget is that, guess what? All of these things came about because we, individuals, over time, decided that's how it was going to be, right? And just more and more people convinced, like, hey, this is how it's going to be. This is why you do these things, right? I mean, even just a freaking right-hand handshake, like, that's the way it's done. Well, guess what? Now it's not. Now it's like
bumps, elbows.
So guess what? There's a social norm that is changing, right? So it's easy to forget that, in the spectrum of the masses, all of the population and ourselves, like, you are the ones who can make that change. So when it comes to this challenge, changing your environment, especially if you're someone who's been working at home for a long time, especially dealing with the weight of COVID and all those types of things. Oh no, I said the word first time I think it's come out on the podcast. Not going to be a focus, but I'm sure it'll come up every now and then because it's part of our lives. But it just, even going to a coffee shop or, a library or a co-working space, or even, I don't know, out to a park. Out of the number of Americans, I'd be curious, outside of the ones who have kids, when is the last time they've been to a park?
Man, yeah, no, that is really fascinating, is that it has done some things with priorities, right? Is shifting it, and then we're talking about with the RVing, and we're talking about physically changing things and changing up your lifestyle and moving into different routines and habits, and all of a sudden parks became something that were a treasure again.
Yeah.
And this is super fascinating to just watch how one blip causes a cascade of reactions that might actually realign us with nature.
Right.
And I'm going to be interested to see how long this lasts.
No, and it is great. It's a great trend. I'm so glad that more and more people are getting out into the outdoors. And that was one of my favorite things about moving out to Los Angeles and to California was there's just so much natural beauty out there, and it's just a norm that everyone goes there. And there's a lot of transplants too, so there's kind of always a natural recurring interest in things going around. So it's like every week someone's going hiking, or they're walking, or they're rollerblading, or skateboarding, or whatever. And even if you're not participating, just seeing that stuff around you, it makes you feel better. And then also by seeing it all around you and all the people around you doing it, it's easier to participate in. And I said to my my uncle the other day when we were on our annual boys trip, we were out in the mountains in Colorado, just outside of Denver, outside of Boulder, and we just went on this walk through this trail, and it was just so peaceful. And the only phones inside's the one we're using to take pictures, and there's no other people there, and it's quiet, and there's a river babbling. I was like, man, if everyone did this like once a day or even once a week, like, I think this would get rid of a lot of the problems in our world.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to kind of think about how captured we've become through attention and through other things like that. And then this idea that our attention could be redirected to things that actually feed us. And, that's one of the things I think we're kind of talking about when we start talking about habits, is it's really fascinating to think of continually having to add habits, because people tend to think that that's the way it goes. But there is something as well about reducing habits, and actually just like, what would it be like if your gains were actually going what you might consider backwards, right? Reducing your inputs by 1% every day.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things as well they talk about in the 1% rule, that book I was talking about earlier, which is the first step a lot of people think to do is, okay, now I'm going to also do these things, right? I'm going to add on all these things, when in fact the first thing a lot of people should do is figure out what they can take out of their lives, right? And that was one of the things that popped in my head earlier when we were talking about the RV. That was one of the great natural prompts was, we had always kind of been a big DVR family. Like both my parents growing up and Danielle's parents growing up, they all had TiVos. They were like the OG TiVo people. Like, yeah, we had it before it was cool, before all your cable DVR boxes existed. And yes, I'm proud of that.
Yes, proud of your early TiVo adoption.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
Because not only did I trick them into not making me watch commercials, but I let them trick me into watching hours and hours more of content and wanting to do it, because I got scheduled and I got programmed into that routine of, okay, now I'm going to sit down and there's always something to watch, right? I don't have to think, is there something to watch? There always is. And there's the regular programs that I have. And then there's some that come in the fall. There's some that come in the spring. And, and I'm not trying to poo-poo on that idea that we shouldn't be watching TV or what have you. But that's an easy one and a very natural one, especially for us Americans, to kind of dial back on. And so when we got into the RV, it was great. We no longer had a DVR. And that's not to say we couldn't have signed up for other streaming apps and things like that. And we did have access to those things. But just because it wasn't on our DVR and it wasn't scheduled every time, we found ourselves watching so much less. And then, of course, the fact that we're naturally stimulated from, being out and about and seeing the things in the natural world, right? It was nice. It was a nice change of pace. And that was kind of the first step back in my consumption. And then becoming a lot more conscious about what I'm consuming, right? And then this brings up the concept of producing or creating versus consuming, and whether or not you realize it, you are both. And so it's up to you, the individual, you writer, you guys at home, to decide in your life, how much of it are you going to be consuming and how much are you going to be producing or creating. And I would argue that if you're not doing at least some creation or some producing in your life, then I think you're missing something, to be honest.
Yeah, there's something about intentionality there. Sitting down and watching TiVo or DVR or whatever without a point to it, yes, there can be sort of mindless zoning out. But there's also something about, if you're going to consume all this, are you going to also output it, right? In a really disgusting way, everything we consume, we also output, right? And if you take this back into the notion of ideas and podcasts and pop culture, then if you're going to consume all these things, and this might be, I don't know, this is arguable, but if we're in that kind of culture that actually desires output, and you're already doing the consumption, how much extra effort does it take to do the output? What does that look like for your day? What does that look like? Do you sum up your day? Do you sum up what you've actually, internalized through your content? Or do you just consume as a distraction?
Yeah, and that is a really salient point. Fancy word, salient.
Oh, yeah.
No, that's a really good point, and it makes me think of one of the tools that's made the biggest difference in my life over the last year, and that's Rome Research. And I'm sure we'll talk about it a little more later. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did I introduce that to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Reed introduced me to Rome as well, so I've picked that up and started running with it. And previously, I was using Evernote.
Yeah, and for those of you who aren't aware, Rome Research is essentially a digital notebook software that you can use, but it has one small difference that's pretty impactful, and it's one of those things that, until you're in it, until you're drinking the Kool-Aid, until you're doing it every day, you don't really feel the true impact of it. But it's that you don't have to think where things are going to go. Most other notebooks, whether they're digital or physical, you got to think, hey, what notebook does that go in? What folder does that go in? What page does that go on? But this software does a really good job of removing that boundary and getting rid of that friction between your brain and the page, which, as we were talking about earlier, having that time to process, and even if you're just doing the dishes and you're letting your brain work subconsciously, well, that's amplified having that by giving yourself the time and space to put your thoughts and the things you've consumed and things like that. You save those in this digital notebook, which Rome I use largely as a journal, and I do what's called interstitial journaling, which is basically, instead of like, every day at 6 p.m. I'm gonna sit down with my thing and I'm gonna write down, it's throughout the day. I'm just writing, okay, I did this thing. I watched this video, and here are a couple of the takeaways I had from it. And maybe I didn't get that many takeaways, but I'll just save the link. That way, anytime I want to come back to it, I'm like, I remembered that one thing came from there. It all interconnects it, and it uses tagging and things like that. And again, we'll talk a lot more about Rome in the future. But the point is by writing those things down, by being more intentional about that consumption, and then also like having that lens of, okay, yes, I'm consuming this thing. How does it relate to some of the other things that I'm interested in, or what have you, and what other value does it bring to me?
Yeah, and we're talking about these. We sort of started off talking about these small gains, small habits, small things, and that's I think one of the things Rome did for me is I was journaling previously, but the idea that at any point I can sort of just keep track of something and write down the takeaways, I find that I'm actually processing content differently now, and that I'm processing it looking for ideas, and I'm looking for content that can be takeaways. And the fascinating thing about that is then I hold on to them longer. They actually start embodying and taking shape in my life and in my head, where I think previously I was consuming a lot of science fiction and just blowing through it, because it was just, I think, a way to distract myself.
Yeah.
And that's a very fascinating thing, is to be proud of yourself for consuming, but not being able to retain any of it. And so the idea was just be like, well, let's just be a little bit more intentional about this and just see what happens. And then now I'm kind of getting addicted to that. And that's one of the things that, as Danielle brought up, there is a dark side to all of this, is getting addicted to sort of ideas of productivity, getting addicted to habits, getting addicted to routine. And some of these kind of things that can come up is that I think we have to sort of stay aware and have checks and balances, and of course have friends as a feedback loop.
So what you're saying is that too much of anything can be a bad thing.
Yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Oh, okay.
No, wait.
So wait, you're saying it's not black and white. It's about all that gray in the middle? Thank you. Thank you. We've now finished giving all of our life lessons in one episode.
That was it. In one episode, Yep. We've summed it all up for you. It's now a Hallmark card.
Yep, we appreciate it.
Here.
Here, I've been Reed Garcia, and this has been Ryder Richards. I jest, but those are definitely some of the themes that we are going to keep touching on time and time again. And the beauty of this is we have at least 3 more days we're going to be doing this, if not more, because we have the rest of this week. We've got Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then after that, we're going to see, are we going to keep doing this every day? Are we going to change to a different format? I don't know. But most likely, hopefully, we'll do one of those things. And you might have noticed I didn't make any commitments there.
That was beautifully done.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. But tomorrow is actually a very exciting episode for us because we actually have our first guest on our show. So on, the theme of improvement and making the show a little bit better every day, we've gotten stale already. We need to bring in a little extra somebody to mix.
I'm already maxed out. I had about all I can take of Reed.
Yes, it doesn't take much. It does not take much. But so after we figure out, the technology magic to make that happen, maybe we'll resize the name so Ryder and Reed are about the same size.
Yeah, because I know that's what's really holding people up right now.
It is. But yeah, so join us tomorrow where we'll have a guest. His name is Known Wells, and he started what's called the Feely Human Collective. You heard that right, Feely Human.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if you could guess what that's about, but it's about humans who feel. And one of the star things that they've done with the Feel a Human Collective is a podcast called You, Me, Empathy. And it's they're way into it. I think it's got like 180 episodes or something like that. But it's talking with people about various things, mental health, and teaching people to be more understanding and empathetic, right? And seeing the people who are in those other walks of life, or maybe have different struggles, and dealing about that. So we'll be talking about with Known about those types of topics, and also probably about the fact how, at least for me, one of my biggest shifts, and you can respond, but you only get a short amount of time because we're talking about tomorrow, but is having that shift of, a label versus a spectrum, right? Which it sounds, cliche, it's a spectrum, blah, 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 roll your eyes here. But it's like, okay, it's not, am I depressed or am I not depressed? It's like, hey, we all have feelings of depression. It's just sometimes they're stronger, sometimes they're not. And with some people, there's, those pits are much darker, right? So talking about how that's a little different than, having just a 1-0, right, on or off.
No, yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and it is something to actually separate out a little bit and to really see that, you are a person who does experience these things, but those things are not all of you.
Yes.
And it's a hard lesson to learn, because we do exist in a society that labels and categorizes, and we've done it to ourselves here on the show, middle class white guys,
right,
highly educated, right? We are in a society that uses these labels to actually help us get through the world, to relieve a little bit of cognitive dissonance up there.
Right. And those things that we do to help make things easier sometimes make things worse, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, and of course, as we've talked about, just being aware of them and having intention is great. So I'm going to be really excited to hear how he thinks about spectrums and how he thinks about emotions, and if they think about regulation, or what kind of I guess steps they use, or if they use any at all. Like maybe that's actually a flawed model itself.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of a teaser for what we'll be talking about tomorrow. And as a reminder for today, your challenge for today is figure out one way that you can change your environment. And remember, that does not need to be every single day. Like, it could just be today. It could be while you're listening to this. If you're not going to do it today, here's the trick. Set yourself a reminder or put it on your calendar some other time to do it. Because if you don't either take action right now or schedule the time to do so, most likely you're never going to take action. So whether that's just taking a different route to get wherever you're going, whether that's, I don't know, looking up a park and going and sitting in the park, and you might be sitting there like, what do you do in parks? But you'll figure that part out, push through it, but figure out one way to change your environment. And come back here tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. Central Time for what is, at least for right now, known as the Morning Show by Helpful for Life. I've been
The Morning Show,
Reed Garcia, and this has been Ryder Richards, and we're signing off now. I think this is the part where
we'll have to work on that side off too.
Yeah.
Reed's got it down. I just kept on interrupting, but
it's stay classy,
San Diego.
yeah, that one.